Ready? Okay, so this is part 4 and last, because my cameraman, technician, director, uploader is leaving. So I got this from a book called The Emotional Life of the Brain by Davidson. And it answers a lot of questions that couldn't be answered before you had functional MRIs to look at brain activity in real time. And in people who are positive about the future, who are feeling good and keep, whatever they're doing, they want to keep doing it because it feels good. And whatever they're doing in their life, some of it feels good. So what we have is the prefrontal cortex sending out signals to the nucleus accumbens, like that, to keep it up. Keep up the positive stuff. Keep up the good feeling. And depressives are people who can't sustain it. Okay, so they started them out with something that made them feel good, made them feel positive emotions. They used stuff like children playing. I think you could probably do it with dogs or cats. And they weren't able to sustain it. But what if you had a lot of things in your environment, a lot of things that you deliberately attached yourself to, that felt good to look at? So many Americans are gardeners, and many Americans have immigrated here to be gardeners to the honky goyim who don't want to do their own yards. But what if you did your own flower bed? And what if you did plan it out? And what if your neighbors thought it really was nice? And what if you liked that particular shade of green or purple? Now, if you saw that as you were getting in your car on your way to work, and if you passed other areas where just ordinary people did something creative with their lawns, that might be a source of positive emotions. That when you got to work, were still operating and could be picked up on by tasks that you suddenly felt good about finishing and you suddenly felt pride in. Some people like their homes. I've become attached to the dwellings in which I live. I think I may even be slightly attached to the dwelling I'm in now, which is really a gift from my cousin who lets me live here free because I have zero net worth. But I think, in certain ways, parts of it, looking outside, is starting to make me feel a little more alive than I would have. And that was true of all the previous places I lived. Now, I live in an area near what's called the Houston Medical Center. The land was fairly valuable, and houses, old houses that were on the land, usable houses, like the one I'm living in, but not of any value compared with the land. So they tore them down and they built McMansions, which are ugly as shit. Now, I don't know how you could wake up in that McMansion unless you became attached to it and got to work and felt good on the way. I mean, you can get attached to things, but you cannot get attached to something that you built and bought because you expected to live in it for a few years and then sell it. So Kahneman, the psychologist, said, you can't really get anything out of a possession unless you notice it, unless you attend to it. How many people look at their cars? Therefore, how much pleasure could you be getting out of it? And so it's not likely to give you a lift. So, in a society where there's lots of activities that cause people to feel positive emotions, then the outlook connection on the brain, the way you assess the future, your willingness to plan for the future would be enhanced. But if it's not qualitatively outstanding, distinctive, anything that you're planning to sell, anything that's for sale, anything that you tell people about in terms of its market value is a commodity. Even something that's very expensive, if you don't love it, then it can't provide you with that. So, I suspect that to the extent that Americans use income for conspicuous consumption, they're losing the power to generate positive emotions spontaneously and unconsciously that could lead to motivation. So here we have it. Americans are not motivated to learn unless they do it on their own. American schools do not traffic in motivation. American schools are run largely by idiots who once saw a movie about a German factory in 1890 and said, "Oh, that's perfect." I suspect German schools don't work either, but they have on-the-job training. So, what do we have? We have a country that seems to need Indians and Chinese and Koreans, and people who feel stifled in Europe, in order to have the initiative to engage in new businesses, or to be part of the creation of something new economically. And we do not have the mechanisms for undoing the damage that our market economy has created. For example, in 30 years, when half of all Americans have diabetes, then we'll see that the American culture is the culture of diabetes. It's the culture of heart failure. It's the culture of cancer. It's the culture of people who don't understand their bodies and are not willing to invest in them. So, what happy people do is, one, they do things that not only are intrinsically enjoyable, but also create a little something that will have future value. So that if you learn and work on something, if you go out of your way to spend time with a friend, that friendship is going to last longer. And being around that friend is going to create an emotional basis that's going to get your ass out to work. If that's your goal. So, we have schools without motivation. We have people working without motivation other than surviving. We have people who don't find science exciting, who don't find neuroscience exciting. Because, boy, those are places, where you can really kick ass in the future. And that might sensitize you to things in the external world, which, as it happens, some people are differentially sensitive to. I had a couple of other brilliant things, and I only have a minute and a half. Okay, I've told you many times about the number of chronic liars that I've had affairs with, and how they sucked me in, mostly by providing a lot of sex. But also, some warmth and romance. And I'm a psychologist. I've dealt with drug addicts. And, I know liars. I've dealt with murderers and people, who've done hard time. And it appears that even if you're suspicious at first, if you really want to believe, if they can make you want to believe, then, all they have to do is show that they're right, on one thing that sounds crazy. And then it's easier for you to accept the stuff since then. So what you have to do is this. You have to look for anything that's said. You can't look at their faces. You can't look at their eyes, their blood pressure, all that stuff's shit. That's police stuff, and that doesn't work. What you look for example, one woman told me she played tennis in LA with Henry Winkler, who was in those days the Fonz on television. And, you know, she pulled that off. And I didn't doubt that this doll would, you know, maybe interest Henry Winkler. And then one time when I made reference to him, she said, "Oh, Harry Winkler?" Well, if she really had known him and making a big deal, she wouldn't have said Harry instead of Henry. You got to watch for these little things, because you're going to be lied to in every walk of life in America. And it's only where you catch one little detail that's out of whack that identifies the liar. Am I out of time?
Is that it?
Am I out?
Yep.